That was
Hello?
crazy.
Are you recording again? Dude, you're still recording.
Yeah, yeah, I already hit record, so we're live, but it just exited out of the tab. I don't know why that happened.
It was rude, dude. You left Lucas and I just hanging.
The whole tab just disappeared. I don't know. Crazy stuff. There's a ghost over here.
Mm. All right. We're talking about ghosts today. What are we talking about, David?
No, we got a video for today. Quick snippet video. It's only like 15 seconds long, I think.
Let's see it, dude.
Ready
I'm
to
locked
see it?
in.
All right, here we go. I'm going to share. Can you see that?
Yep.
All right. Here we go.
Core of addiction is about not wanting to be present in your life because your life is too painful a place to be. Heroin, it can actually be gambling or porn or whatever it can be, is a way of in that moment not being present with that pain and distress. There's a really challenging thing that Marianne Faithfull said once. She said, heroin saved my life because if it wasn't for heroin, at that point, I would have killed myself.
Right.
Now, Marianne is not saying that heroin, I assume, I'm pretty sure, not saying heroin is a good solution to despair, obviously, for all the reasons that everyone watching knows. But it's the best solution anyone offered her. And it's on us that no one offered her a better solution. The core of addiction.
All right.
All right. Thanks, David. I have not seen this
It's about
video.
not wanting to be present in your life.
So the core of addiction is about not wanting to be present in your life.
Okay. Who wants to start breaking it down first, giving reactions? Lucas, you want to go first? You want me to?
I can go. I like that video a lot. When
Are you on your PlayStation again? Hang on, I feel like you're a little quiet. Maybe it's just me though. Can you hear him okay, Dave?
It was quiet for me too. It sounded like his mic, but the mic was just lower.
Oh, okay.
Well, we got the kids playing with the knobs in there. You're not locking the office. What's going on over there?
Office is locked.
Oh, that was a little
loud.
That's better.
Yeah, I like that video when you sent it, and I thought it really hit the nail on the head. It's just there's so many reasons why people might not want to be present in their life, and that's where there's so much fluctuation. It could be because they're experiencing abuse or they experienced abuse in the past. But I think it's interesting how much it's on like the lighter side of things, I guess, comparatively to like abuse or some really traumatic thing happening. A lot of it can be, just like grieving the life that I thought I was supposed to have for whatever reason, and that everything was supposed to be easy, and that life is hard because I got to get a job and I got to work and it's monotonous. And I thought by 25, I'd have a Lamborghini and $1 million, and I don't, and I'm not even on track to it. And it just feels like I'm getting knocked down all the time. And what's the point? So I just think there's a huge spread there as to why someone might not want to feel present in their life, or why not might like their life. That has a lot to do with like humility and gratitude and acceptance and action and courage and so many different things of like what you can change and what you can't.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that, Lucas. That was all really well said. I think too, yeah, it's such a small, it can be such a remedy to like supposedly like a small loss, but you often look at markers of when people really start escalating their substance use or even trying it for the first time. It's very often when maybe like, if we're talking about somebody in going from middle school to high school, it's a loss of like, maybe security. And so they start using in high school to feel like part of the cool crowd. Perhaps they no longer play a sport they used to play, or they lose that. Perhaps they are having a hard time adjusting to like living in a new city. It can be some of these just like developmental things that happen, and substances come in and actually like solve the problem. They're really good at solving the problem until they create a problem. I also really like that guy talking because he's a really good author and researcher. He's got a couple books. One is one of my favorite books on the war on drugs. Well, actually, I'll restate that. It's like the only book I've read about the war on drugs, and I found it really good, called Chasing the Scream. And he also has a good TED Talk titled Everything You Thought You Knew About Addiction Is Wrong. And he talks a lot about connection being a fundamental driver of like not only recovery, but also of addiction, feeling disconnected from things. And he has another book all about anxiety and depression that's really good too. I believe it's called Lost Connections. So he's got good stuff. I really appreciate how he phrases things. He does it in a really concise way, and he does it in very anecdotally with a lot of stories. But yeah, man, I think the substances, people use them not because they're bad people or anything like that. People use drugs and alcohol because they work. Like they work. They help you to feel something. They help you to feel this connection that you're so badly wanting, you know, but at a cost to everything else when we start talking about like addiction. So yeah, I think it was really well said. I agree with what he said on the video.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection. I didn't realize. I've read Chasing the Scream. It's been years, but I didn't realize that he wrote that. Wasn't that like an MAT friendly, like heavy book? Is like, let's create more places where people can use safely.
He talks about, yeah, some of the like he really talks more about like the penalty based way we approach addiction being really problematic, like just throwing people in jail.
Jails,
and he gives the example Portugal at the time had not necessarily legalized everything, they had decriminalized everything and had taken money that was typically going towards like substance abuse task force or prisons. They were taking that money and they were putting it into like essentially like people on the streets to go make sure there's like clean needles, to go like talk to people who are in like the slums or wherever and offer them help, and trying to put that money into like programs to actually help people as opposed to just put them in jail. And he talks about like a lot of factors of where the war on drug came from, like from a moral standpoint, but also like some of it being like racially motivated around like the early 1900s. And it's just really good. Like a really, really good book, and it's told in a really it's an easy but hard read, if that makes sense. But yeah, so I don't know if it's like necessarily MAT specific, but he does talk about it. For some people that's what they need, you know, like they're not ready to be abstinent. So meet them where they're at, give them something to help them survive, so we don't have like HIV or hepatitis or whatever killing people. Provide people with, you know, heroin that's actually like been checked out by a doctor, as opposed to like just heroin that could have like a ton of fentanyl in it and kill people. So you're trying to keep people alive and like help them maybe like be steady and secure enough to figure out like, is there a new way I can do things, you know?
Yeah. I also remember there was a component about just jails costing way more, costing like the government was having to put way more money. Tax dollars were having to go way more towards jails than they were these clinics.
Yeah. And I think that still stands. Like there's something about like the jail aspect of it. It's like when somebody steals from you or hurts you in some way or scares you, you want to punish them. Like that's just like a very natural human thing going way back. I mean, we've always done that, I think. And so I think there's something about like punishing people that kind of like feels good or feels very like primal. And also, dude, yeah, it's a lot of it's just like lobbyists and like people just figuring out like, hey, I'll give you money for your campaign. And I mean, it's some probably like Lucas probably knows more about this than I do. I feel like this is right up Lucas's alley. Like like a lot of like just corrupt stuff in there. Lucas, you got anything on this?
Corruption, greed,
Prison privatization. It's a huge problem.
Come on.
It became corporate, you know, and there's more and more private prisons opening that are for-profit prisons. And how do you profit? By having more people in prison. So you lobby for stricter laws, especially what's easy around drugs. I think you target that towards penalizing people that largely society won't care as much about. Drug addicts fits perfectly. And then you have racial stuff mixed in there as well. It's not good. It's just bad incentives, and it doesn't fix a problem. I was also thinking when you were saying, you know, just talking about like trauma and the reasons that we use drugs and alcohol, I'd say like 99% of my trauma came from once I started using drugs and alcohol. Like it came from the use and the drinking. Of going to jail, that was traumatic. Getting a DUI, that was traumatic. Getting in car accidents, those were traumatic. Overdosing was traumatic. Having friends die was traumatic. stealing, problems with friends, family, getting fired from jobs. It's like all the stuff that gets layered on from the solution, just adding more problems to then be solved by the solution. So just that hole that you get into that just gets so deep so quick, when it started with like, I just don't really feel comfortable in my skin, I'm anxious talking to people, and this, drugs and alcohol solved that for me.
Yeah, and it's such a human feeling, like that nervousness and feeling like, is everybody looking at me? You know, and the sad thing is, like, it starts off with like such like a normal developmental thing that gets hijacked by this like solution. And to his point, right, like people use to be disconnected from their life. If you start having all this like pain and loss and trauma building up, well, you want to just disconnect more, because what life is it that you're even trying to connect to? So it becomes, this giant like snowball effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention like the shame and stuff around, now I'm a heroin addict, and how do people view a heroin addict, and how do people view a heroin addict with 2 DUIs and possession charges, and when I come into the hospital for an overdose, like just all of it just snowballs, I think, so much, which makes the problem worse. And unfortunately, that's just kind of what comes with drugs and alcohol. I think we want to fix that part. Like I know I attribute some of that to like the renaming, of like, it's not addiction, it's substance use disorder. It's not a relapse, it's a reoccurrence. It's not a halfway house or a sober living, it's a recovery residence. We want to give these like cleaner, more pristine names to this like kind of ugly thing, and I think at the core of it, it's just always going to come out looking ugly when it's someone who's stealing and lying and manipulating and doing drugs, and just that kind of stuff comes with addiction, unfortunately. I don't want to make someone feel worse about it, but I think we do just got to acknowledge that whatever name you give it, in 5 or 10 years, that'll now be what we think about with that name. We'll think about lying and stealing and being dirt, just every negative attribute to addiction, because addiction is a negative thing.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about like, if helping somebody like reconnect to their life, like how do you do that? And how do you do that? Like, that's such a big question, right? And we're talking about like, you could either like do the punishment route, you could do more of like what I was saying earlier with Portugal, what they were doing, or maybe you're still doing. I haven't actually looked into it in a while, but I know we try to do that here. Like, we really try to help our like families and clients like reconnect with their life and be okay with like the disruptions that can cause, so they can be more confident to handle life as they go forward. But sometimes, man, just even with all that support, sometimes it's just really hard to lean into that, And I don't know. I mean, like, I know what y'all believe, obviously, like we work together, we spend a lot of time together, but any thoughts on that? Like, how do you handle that persistent desire to disconnect, and to realizing that not everybody wants to connect in that way, and they're just like, man, I'll go back to the way it was before.
I feel like we try to come up, I feel like everyone does MAT, harm reduction to some extent. Like at GT, a lot of times it looks like caffeine, nicotine, the things that we accept, that we're like, all right, the risks associated with these are far less than heroin, alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, whatever. So we'll live with these for a while we try to build a life that we're happy and want to be present in, which is also tough, because who wants to be present in their life in sober living or treatment or a clinical program where you have rules and restrictions and stuff like that. So it's easy to be like, this sucks more than the addiction. I feel like shit. I do not want to be present in this life. I got other guys I'm living with. They're not who I want to be with. I've got all these rules. I got to be sober. I got to go to meetings, all that kind of stuff. So it's a tough uphill slog, to fight that. But I do find if you get through it and you just keep moving more and more into the real world and the real life that you do want to be present in, that just takes time. That doesn't happen in 30 days. It doesn't happen in detox. It starts to happen in long-term sober living, and that's what we are. And that's about as long-term as anyone normally puts towards addiction issues. We keep guys for like a year. I mean, there's some programs that are 2 years, 3 years long, stuff like that, but super rare. So even at a year, we have guys that are just turning that corner where they're like, I kind of like my life now, or at least it's more, I like the hope of what I believe my life is going to be now. And I'm actively working towards that. And I feel good about that.
Yeah, I have connected to that, and that is worth like striving for, as opposed to I can see it, as opposed to just being this fictional thing that I can never see. And now I'm getting my connection need through that vision, that future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's so different. People are so different, and people have, we've talked about it in terms of a pride tank and filling that up. And you needing to get to a place where you feel good enough about your life in recovery to where it's worth staying in that life of recovery. And I think everybody's got different tanks. You might have a 15-gallon tank. Lucas has a 30-gallon tank. I have a 12-gallon tank. It's just like you've got to be able to alter the path a little bit for each individual. And I think that's too where even as professionals, you have to be careful of acting like you have all of the answers, like you have the crystal ball and you can tell somebody exactly what they need to do to get on track, because you have to make tweaks.
If I have a 30-gallon tank, how fuel efficient would you say I am? No, I'm just kidding. My truck
at
has a
least
30.
22 in the city.
He did do
all
a big, man. He did a big car analogy a couple
Yeah.
episodes ago.
We'll call you a hybrid, dude. 22 in the city, about 30 on the highway.
Whoa, dude.
Well, I'll take it. No, I think it's so true that people are so different. And I mean, we work with young guys, that if you were like, what is your perfect ideal life? Like, what would you want? They're like, to live at my mom's house and have her pay for me, and to not have to have they would paint this picture of this life that you're still like, no, you're never going to be happy with that. That goes back to like kind of why you did drugs and drank in the first place. And then some will tell you like, oh, my own apartment, my own place, a job that I love, to be happy, a wife and kids, a family, good friends. Most of the time we get all that stuff, but sometimes guys have been in it so long that it's like the best possible thing they can think of is exactly the reason that they're with us.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, because I'm also trying to think of how hard it is to get somebody to actually admit that. My dream is to live in my mom's basement, and like have her pay. That's a hard thing to admit. And if you can get somebody to actually admit that out loud, like I feel like they hear themselves say it, and it's a bit of like reality check. But that's a really hard thing to admit,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I mean, I'm thinking back to my own experience, and I don't even know how I got there, of this like not wanting to be present in my life, or going back to the video we watched maybe a month or two ago that talked about it in terms of a comfort trap. But I wanted to sit in this place where people weren't holding me accountable for anything, and they weren't relying on me for anything. And that scared me to death when they started to rely on me to get things done or for certain things in life. And now I'm being held accountable for certain things. Like, I wanted to numb that out as much as possible. I can even remember telling my mom, when my mom was like, you've got to stop. Like, we were having an argument, I think, about like things I was taking or drinking too much. And she was like, you've got to stop this. You've got to start doing this and this. And I was like, looked at her so seriously, and I meant it so seriously. I was like, I did not ask to be here. You brought me into like, that's like where I went with like, don't put more stuff on me. Like, I want to be in this comfort trap, and I didn't ask to come into this world. I was in like a very sick place with it. But I don't even know how I ended up like that far down the path of saying things like that to my mom. And in my experience, I think some of it was MAT. I don't think every experience with MAT is a bad experience, but mine was a bad experience with MAT. And I think it steamrolled me to getting to that place of, sure, I already had an addiction problem with drinking and smoking weed and stuff. But then I got introduced to painkillers because a buddy got in a car wreck. And then I was like, I tried them the first time, and I was like, man, I don't want to go without this. I want to do them tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. This is great. I love how I numb out. And I didn't realize I got to a place where then I couldn't go without it, or I started to physically feel sick. And I didn't even know what was happening the first time that I went through withdrawals. I was like, I thought I was going to die. I'm like, my heart is racing. I'm sweating. I'm freaking out. I've got anxiety. Well, then I go to a doctor, and they're like, okay, this is what this is. We got to get you on methadone, and we're going to wean you off of that. Well, and then I have to come off the methadone, and I'm super anxious. So they're like, okay, well, let's get you on Xanax to come, like, let's get your anxiety under wraps. Well, then I have to come off the Xanax, and I'm even worse. Like I'm going into public places thinking that everyone's talking about me. People are watching me. I was like as paranoid as you hear people being on methamphetamines. And it just like, man, I got down this deep path of like, I don't want any responsibility. I don't want, I'm incapable of being relied upon. So I'm going to go back to what my solution was like opiates and just numbing out completely.
It's brutal. I mean, it's easy to say here today, like that happened exactly how it was supposed to, because you look at your life today. You know what I mean? Like you check the MAT box early on, and you're like, this isn't really an option. I'm not going to find my solution there, you know. But that's not everybody's story. So I think it's really rough. We've come a long ways, I would say, and like being able to understand like the addictive nature to these substances. Even since I've been a therapist, like I can think like 10 years ago, it was much more freely, like opiates are much more freely prescribed, but especially like benzos were more freely prescribed. And I feel like there's been a lot of education and just like realizing that from the medical community. I think. I mean, maybe you guys have a different opinion on that, but what do y'all
No,
think?
yeah, I mean, even like 10 years or so ago, I got asked to speak to a room of nurse anesthetists and anesthesiologists about just my experience with. Why are you smiling, David? Is that funny?
You were nervous about that one.
I was super nervous, dude. I got asked by a bunch of doctors to go speak to a bunch of doctors about addiction, and it's just like, do y'all know who I am? Why would you listen to me? It wasn't like I was talking about the science of addiction or anything, but just like my experience with getting pain pills, how to kind of trick doctors into give it to me, how it just led to the next thing, psychiatrist role in it, just all the stuff personal to my story. So, I mean, that was even like 10 years ago, let alone when if I talk to any dentist or doctor today, they're like, oh yeah, we don't prescribe any of that. Or we try to prescribe as little as possible. You get like 5 pills and you have to call back and make a pretty good case that you need more, rather than I feel like, early 2000s, it was like, here's a 90-day script with 5 refills. Let me know if you need a higher milligram, just send a text. I mean, it just felt so easy to go up and so hard to come down, which was also my experience with methadone. I remember when I was in a methadone clinic and it was like a little bitty sheet about like this big to go up in dosage. And it was just like, just kind of think I need to go up. And I remember it was like a full sheet to go down in dosage. And people asking me like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want to go down? Are you sure you're ready for that now? Which all could have been from a good place. I don't mean to say that it was like evil or something, but it was just easier to go up than it was to go down. And then even in the sense of just coming off opiates, down is sick, don't feel good, withdrawal symptoms. Up is kind of a little bit high for a while until my body gets used to that new dose. So it's always just balancing, like, to give more addictive drugs to the person already struggling with addiction. There's just going to be a high likelihood of further abuse rather than recovery. Not to say that someone else can't get something really good from that, or that it shouldn't be done or shouldn't be allowed. Certainly nothing like that. But I just think it does come with downsides. And I don't like it being this kind of silver bullet to addiction of like, if we just get everyone on MAT, there's a good chunk of people that'd be really good for, and there's a good chunk of people that'd be really bad for, I think.
Well, especially since medicine has evolved. I mean, there is like medicine that is anti-craving. Like it is strictly like a blocker, and it does not have like an active component in it. So you're not going to see people dealing that on the street or abusing it from that standpoint. The other thing I think is really cool is when you think about like in our program, when we see guys do their own version of MAT with the energy drinks or the nicotine, what's really interesting is that like so many of them, like after they've been doing that for months, and especially as more control comes back in their life, as they are like moving through the sober living, moving like into more independent living, building these things in their life, a hopeful future to connect to, you see that stuff go down. I mean, how many guys have we seen over the years where it's like you see them like, and they're like alumni of the program, and they're not, slamming like vapes or energy drinks like they were back in the day at all, because they got more control back in their life, and they're also really like value what they had built in their life. You know, like it's pretty cool to see that actually play out. We've seen that with a lot of guys.
Yeah, I think it's similar to like the saying, a body in motion stays in motion. It's like a body that starts on like a health path oftentimes continues to like look for more ways to go down that path. And I lost my train of thought in my last story, but where I was meant to end up with it is just, I found that what pulled me out of that place the most, of like wanting to be in the comfort trap, is to be forced out of it, like for structure and for people to hold me accountable. And like, once that stuff was like forced upon me through treatment, like that's what filled up my pride tank. And it's the things that like we think that we don't want. It's like the working and getting the paycheck and paying the bills and paying your car insurance. And like those things sound terrible, but they also make us feel good about ourselves at the end of the day. So it was like the responsibility that I didn't want is what kept me sober, if that makes sense.
Bro, the responsibility is huge. It is huge, because within the responsibility, there's purpose, you know. And I think I've rambled to you guys about it. I may have said it on one of these other episodes, but like as you go through life, I've certainly realized this in recent years, if not months, that I have a lot of responsibility to time in my life, right? Like with having little kids, having elderly parents, or a parent that's again elderly, losing my dad. Like there's a bigger responsibility that is being put on me, being this middle of the sandwich, this middle age. And with that, dude, like so much purpose. There's so much purpose of like, what do I need to get up to today to do? Who do I need to show up for? How do I like do the thing with integrity, right? So much purpose. And you don't have as much of that when you're young. Like you don't realize like how many people are like relying on you or are really affected by your actions. And so responsibility feels just scary because you're only seeing from that standpoint. But as you get older, you start to realize like, man, with this responsibility come purpose, and purpose is a beautiful thing. And you start to lose it later in life too, when you maybe are retired or, you know, maybe not close to your family or whatever the case is, you start to lose like responsibility then. And I can tell you a lot of people that I've seen over the years who are on the later end of their life, and they're bored and they're lonely, because like they've lost some of that purpose and responsibility then, and they miss like the old days of like going to work or hanging out. For my dad, who like going being a firefighter, like he really like struggled with his retirement because he just lost a lot of like purpose, you know. So I don't know, it's a super interesting thing, and it's a really cool way of looking at it that helps me like deal with those hard days or the really busy days when you're really stressed out.
Yeah, I just thought of another interesting thing or interesting way of looking at it. But when you're that kid and you're seeing all of the adults that have all the responsibility on their shoulders, you're thinking that you don't realize then how few answers they have to having life figured out. Like when you're a kid, you're like, oh, they know everything. Like they've got it all figured out. I even I don't know. It never occurred to me as a kid, like I would one day walk into a doctor's office and the doctor would be younger than me, you know, like making those connections that like nobody has it all figured out. But for some reason there was this expectation that I had to have it all figured out. And I think that was part of this gap of like, I need to stay in the comfort trap because I don't feel equipped to do things the way that the adults in my life have been doing things. And part of that is like how they showed up in my life and overcompensated of like dressing, like picking out my clothes for the next day, or, you know, the things that, you know, they did to make my life easier sometimes would hurt me. Does all of that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like I always think and talk about like freedom. With adulthood comes freedom, and with freedom comes responsibility. And responsibility feels like this huge drag on freedom. But it just kind of clicked for me when you were talking, Cole, of like, but with responsibility comes purpose. So it goes to like an even more positive thing, you know, if not on the same level as freedom, where now it's like the positive outweighs the negative. of like, I get purpose and freedom, and what I have to give in return is responsibility.
Yeah.
Which is not as raw a deal as, I don't know. Once you get into it and accept it, it's not as raw a deal, but I totally get it for any young person, 18 to 22, of just like, this is the rawest deal of all time. And a lot of our guys, that's what they want. They want maximum freedom with no responsibility. And that's where they're really struggling with fitting into life. And life's telling them, and the people around them and society is telling them, like, that doesn't fly. So they're getting fired from jobs and ditched by friends and pushed away by family and all the negative things, you know, because they're just like, I want to be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, without any responsibility in the world.
Yeah.
Dude, I get it. That sounds great, right? Like, who doesn't think that sounds great? And especially when you're young, but you don't get much in return for it.
Mhm.
You know, the freedom of a cardboard box. I mean, at some point is what that lands with.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like this is a heavy spot to cut the podcast off. But Cole, I know you've got to go pick up kiddos.
We gotta go to I got STEAM night at school, dude. We gotta go eat some pizza, do PTA, and go look at the science lab and artwork for the year and all kind of stuff. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hoorah.
Well, now you have some good topics to bring to the table there.
How about that, dude? I'm sure they'd
Knowledge
love to hear about that.
What do you guys think about the relationship between freedom, responsibility, and purpose? Jim, why don't you go first? But
Yeah.
by the way, pass a piece of pizza this way.
I love this topic. I feel like I could write a book on it. It's so interesting to me. And it's one that like only hit now, like pretty recently. So I do feel for these guys that are like 18, 22 years old who don't get it, because like I work in this field and it's just now like clicking. And like, oh dang, like this isn't that, it's not as raw of a deal as I thought it. I've been thinking that for 40 years is a bad deal. And I'm finally like, man, it's not that bad of a deal. It's actually a really good deal. So I don't know. I have a lot of empathy for him. I really do.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll let you get out of here. Thanks for filming.
All right.
We'll see you next time.
Deuces. See you.
Adios.